Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of Digital Fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and this might very well be our very last video for leaks from Modern Horizons 3. Official spoiler season does start tomorrow on Tuesday, May 21st, I believe. So the very last tail end of leaks that I've scrounged up from over the weekend are included in this video, and also a few official spoilers as well that I'm just dumping in there because they came alongside some of the story drops that Wizards put up. They've been doing that lately. They've been putting out just a couple of spoiler cards to go along with their stories that they've been dropping on their site. So we're going to cover those as well, and we're just going to basically wrap up almost like a finale of leak season, I guess, before spoiler season starts officially tomorrow with our first official spoilers. And I'll be covering all of that for sure, but let's just get caught up and get these last bits of remnants out of the way before we dive right into the cards. Make sure you like the video if you haven't already. It's you guys that are liking the videos every time that are helping the channel to grow so quickly. It's amazing, honestly, to see how quickly things have been progressing, and I am super grateful to you guys that have been doing it. So if you're one of those that's been liking every video, let me know in a comment below so I can heart that comment and let you know that I appreciate you. But if you're new here and you haven't liked the video, well, like the video as well, but also subscribe so you don't miss any of our content drops. Got tons of spoiler content on the way, tons of cool Thunder Junction deck techs, lots of cool stuff. So with all of that out of the way, let's just jump right into the cards here. We're going to go over the official ones first, and then we're going to get into the leaks. This is Basking Brood-Scale, 1 green and 1 for a 2/2 Eldrazi Lizard. It has Devoid, so even though it costs green mana, it's technically colorless. And then it has Adapt 1 for 1 green and 1. So you can pay that 2 mana and adapt it, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and basically have it adapt. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Basking Brood-Scale, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token that can sacrifice to add a colorless Hedron mana to your mana pool. This guy's pretty good as a common. Honestly, this is going to be really good for limited, and the fact that it can activate itself to make that first Eldrazi spawn creature token is really good when you take into account the fact that if you have other ways of putting counters on this, you're going to be able to keep repeating that, keep making more and more spawns as you're powering this guy up and making him bigger and bigger over time. So I think when you add the fact that he's kind of got that value built into him, but then also has that ceiling of being able to scale and pump out tons of spawn creature tokens over the course of a game, potentially, if your deck is built that way, I think he's really good. I like him a lot. Next up, we've got Petrifying Meddler. This is a 4/5 Eldrazi for 1 blue and 4. It does have Devoid, so it's technically no color. When you cast this spell, you get to tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. And also, this guy has reach. So another really good common here. It's obviously limited filler, but as far as limited filler goes, we're seeing like the power level of these commons shoot really high, and that makes sense because this is a Modern Horizons set, and the power level of a set overall is really high. So limited is also going to represent that, right? They're also going to mirror that fact. So you can expect these commons to be much more powerful than in, you know, a traditional standard set or what have you. So limited's going to be really interesting, and the fact that we get to use these cards on Arena for drafts and sealed is going to be super fun. So I'm gonna definitely be jumping into that. I hope you'll join me on some of the live streams for that stuff. But this guy's super fun. Moving on. Echoes of Eternity. Now, this is a card that already leaked a while ago, and we covered it back when it first leaked, but Wizards went ahead and put out the official spoiler for it, so I'm just going to go over it very quickly here. This is 6 colorless mana for a Kindred Enchantment Eldrazi. 3 of that colorless mana is actual colorless Hedrons, so you do have to pay the actual colorless mana in order to play this. If a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control or another colorless permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time, but it doesn't stop there. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, you copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. And we've also got an alternate art here. As you can see, the art is pretty amazing, honestly. I love the flavor of this card, and it's pretty gnarly. But the power level is insane. The fact that it's a kindred enchantment means it counts as a creature type Eldrazi, can trigger off of other things that care about that, which is really, really interesting. But then if you cast an Eldrazi that's colorless that has a cast trigger, not only are you going to get 2 copies of that Eldrazi, but each of those copies is going to get its cast trigger multiplied as well. You're going to end up with 4 triggers for whatever that cast ability is. And obviously this can work for more than just Eldrazi, right? Anything that's colorless can trigger this. But the intention here is to make something really, really crazy for Eldrazi tribals. So really cool card, but we're going to move on to some newer stuff. We've got Drowner of Hope. Now this is a Commander Modern Horizons 3 card. This is 1 blue and 5 for a 5/5 Eldrazi with Devoid. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature tokens that can tap. They don't tap. They sacrifice to add a colorless Hedron mana to your mana pool. So you can also sacrifice an Eldrazi Scion to tap target creature. So really, really cool enabler and payoff for these Eldrazi Scion creature tokens for going wide. Not only does it give you some if you can use them for some other payoffs, but it provides a payoff so that if you have a bunch of these built up, you can maybe just use this as a win condition, tap down all their blockers by sacrificing Scions, or tap down their attackers if they've got something with Annihilator that you're worried about coming in. Very versatile, really cool card. It is only for Commander though, unfortunately, which is kind of a bummer. I'm not a big fan of the Commander-only products, and I'm even less of a fan for including something like that alongside a Modern Horizons 3 set, because it just seems like it doesn't make sense. It contradicts itself. It's a modern set, which is why it's called Modern Horizons, but yet there is a subset of cards which aren't legal in Modern. It's super confusing. I don't know. Wizards wants money, I guess. Let's move on to the next card. This is our first actual leaked card here. This is Vexing Bauble. 1 mana for an artifact. It is an uncommon. You can pay 1, tap it, and sack it to draw a card, which is similar to other baubles and other cards like this in the past. But the real draw here is whenever a player casts a spell while this is still on the battlefield, if no mana was spent to cast it, you get to counter that spell. That's going to work for plot stuff. It's going to work for so many different things that are free casting, like Atali, and all sorts of cards. Like, free casting things is really big in Magic, even in Standard right now, let alone Modern. So the ability to just kind of take that away just by having your Vexing Bauble on the field is pretty good. Also helps you go wide for artifacts for decks that care about going wide for artifacts, which it really seems like there's a push into that with this set as well. And then, like, if it isn't useful against this certain opponent, you can just sack this to draw cards. So kind of win-win-win all around. This card just seems really, really good. Next up, we've got Arena of Glory. This is a rare land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain, so it's going to be a lot better in monocolor decks. It can tap for a red mana. You can also pay 1 red mana and tap it and exert it to add 2 red mana, and if that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains haste until end of turn. This land is really interesting because you're not really getting any extra mana out of it, right? You have to tap this land and pay another mana, so that's basically like using 2 mana to get your 2 mana, but then you also have to exert it, which means you can't use it for mana next turn. So in a way, you're not ramping at all, you're staying on rate with the amount of mana you can produce this turn, you're actually losing a mana next turn, so what you're really getting out of it is haste specifically, and only on creatures that you can dump 2 red mana into. So it'll be decent for like Eldrazi Tribal, where they're all colorless, and you can put red mana into them, and it's probably fine, you can give it haste. That seems kind of cool, like slamming in with a big hasty Annihilator creature seems pretty wild. But you do have to be kind of careful about this, because you are giving up long-term mana production for some short-term hastiness. But that being said, it might be good enough to still see play. Granted, you still need to take into account the fact that this is going to be much, much better in a mono-red deck, which kind of limits where this sees play. Is there going to be a mono-red Eldrazi deck? Probably not. So, kind of a weird one. but does some interesting things. I'm excited to at least mess around with it and see where this card ends up. It's a pretty cool idea. But we're going to move on. This is 𝑏arogoyf. This one was really hard to clean up. I did the absolute best I could to make this presentable. The photo was taken at a very weird angle. There was a lot of glare. Parts of the card were cut off, but we did our best here to make it look like an actual card. This is a Lurgoyf. We don't know how big it is, but I'm going to assume the text is going to tell us how big it is. It's probably a 4-mana creature. I think the mana cost is 2 black and 2. It has Death Touch and Lifelink, and its power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. So it's basically like a Tarmogoyf, except it probably costs 4 mana and has Death Touch and Lifelink, which is kind of interesting. Whenever 𝑏arogoyf deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards. If you do, you may put a creature card from among them into your hand. So not only is it a Tarmogoyf that has Death Touch and Lifelink for a little more mana, but it's also able to kind of grow itself by having a mill enabler alongside it that can trigger when you deal damage to the combat damage to a player, so that you can help grow your graveyard and potentially help make this bigger, and then on top of that also get a creature card that you milled back into your hand. So if you don't need creatures in your graveyard because you already have that type covered, you can get your best creature that you milled back. Maybe you're in Lurgoyf Tribal, you can get one of your other Lurgoyfs back to your hand, maybe a cheaper one, you can jam it out right away. Seems like there's a lot of potential value and a big ceiling here. Just seems like a really cool card. It is another commander only card, which makes me cringe a little bit, but it is what it is. I'm glad that this Lurgoyf tribal theme does exist. It just seems like a really interesting archetype to try and mess around with. But next up, we've got Kozilek, the Broken Reality. This guy's crazy. 9 colorless mana, none of which is a colorless Hedron, for a 9/9 legendary creature Eldrazi. Other colorless creatures you control get +3/+2, so it's a lord for like artifact creatures and Eldrazi, anything colorless, but it's kind of a super lord, which makes sense because it's really expensive. It gives much more than a +1/+1 buff, right? It's almost like it 2.5 lords stapled onto this one creature. And then when you cast this spell, up to 2 target players each manifest 2 cards from their hands. For each card manifested this way, you draw a card. So if you're playing this in a 2-player game, you choose yourself, you choose your opponent, you're going to manifest 2 cards from your hand onto the battlefield as 2/2 creatures and draw 2 cards, and your 2/2s are going to get +3/+2 from the Lord ability, so they're actually going to be 5/4s. You get 2 5/4s that are face down cards from your hand that could potentially somehow maybe be flickered into their normal versions, which is kind of crazy in and of itself. But then your opponent also has the ability to manifest stuff, but if they do, you get to draw even more cards. So at the very least, you get 2 5/4s, a 9/9, and draw 2 cards, and then potentially maybe even draw more cards if your opponent takes you up on the manifesting. So it seems kind of crazy. It's also crazy when you think about the fact that it's a cast trigger, so they can't counter it, right? You're drawing the cards no matter what, you're getting the creatures no matter what, even if they deal with the Kozilek, like, you have your value. So this works kind of perfectly for slotting into a normal Eldrazi style deck, and I'm kind of excited to see just how deep these Eldrazi tribal decks can get after this set comes out, because these creatures seem kind of amazing. I really want Eldrazi to come back in a standard set. I'm really pulling for it. I do have a conspiracy theory that eventually we're going to get there by next year. And I think we're eventually circling back to Emrakul breaking out of the moon and getting back to that, but we'll see. That's a long ways away, but I think we're headed there. I think that's the next big bad. But regardless, Kozilek here, very cool card. But moving on, we have Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury. This is a 6/6 legendary Elder Giant. So yes, this is a new member of the Elder Giant cycle of creatures from, I believe it was Theros. And this one's kind of wild. It's 3 mana for a 6/6, 1 white, 1 red, and 1. When it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice it unless it escaped, like all Elder Giants. Whenever Flage enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. So this is basically a Lightning Helix that's a Kroxa. It's a Kroxa that's a Lightning Helix. Like, sure, it costs 1 extra mana, but it also has Escape. For 2 white and 2 red, and exiling 5 other cards from your graveyard, it could come back onto the battlefield from your graveyard as the 6/6, Lightning Helix something again, and whenever it swings at that point on, it's also going to Lightning Helix. So I think this is kind of crazy. It's probably better than any of the other Elder Giants, just because it can act as removal, it can go to the dome, it can buff up your life total. Being able to take out a potential blocker every time you swing with your 6/6 is really, really good upside. So, I mean, I think this card is just bananas. I don't know what they were thinking making it. A Lightning Helix on an Elder Giant is crazy, but they did it. They did the thing. And it's a real card, or at least I'm pretty sure it's a real card. I would like to note that take all of these cards with a grain of salt, because they are leaks, and even though we're 99% sure they're all correct and they're all right, and I've done my best to clean them up here and make them look presentable, there is still a possibility that these are fake. I doubt it. They seem to be everywhere. Everyone seems to be in agreement that they're probably real. But just wanted to make sure you guys understood there is a chance. There's always a chance. But that's going to do it for today. That's the last card. The set's looking kind of crazy. Join me for spoiler season tomorrow. Spoiler season starts proper. We're going to get more videos up. We're going to cover all of the new spoilers. It's going to be wild. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of my content. Tons of spoilers on the way. Tons of cool deck techs. And if you're not new, do me a favor and like the video, because that liking of the video helps the video get out to so many more people. It matters so much more than you could possibly imagine. Even just one like, every single one like, just matters so much. So thank you so much for your help, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow for spoiler season. See you then. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there, and if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.